Okay, so the live stream is already on. Greetings, fellow human rights enthusiasts from the Zoom account and then from the live stream YouTube. Good afternoon from Jakarta and welcome back to one of our series of A3T webinars. I'm Nadine Charani here as the A3T Secretariat, present here today to guide our discussion for today. And I stated in the poster, and maybe you have seen it through Contrast's Instagram or Twitter, and then ODCAR and A3T also. We will discuss further and deeper regarding the criminalization against HRDs in Asia. And to discuss about this for today's webinar, we will spill the tea together along with three criminalized HRDs, and we also have frontliner defender here, representative, who have voiced facts around what has been happening in their respective countries and the region, but instead they are being criminalized. So here's a bit update for the three of them. First, I have with me Fathia Maulidianti. She's the coordinator of Contrast, and then we have Haris Azhar, the co-founder of Lokataru. Now, both of them, Fathia and Haris, have been criminalized for expressing their findings through several research regarding the exploitation in Papua and the involvement of Indonesia's coordinating ministry for maritime and investment affairs. The two expressed their concern through Haris's YouTube channel in a podcast session. But rather than receiving maybe support or reflection, evaluation towards the designated person, instead, in the later quarter of 2021, both of them received subpoena. And later in the March 2022, they received a suspected letter from the police to have further investigated for this case. Now, I really look forward for this discussion with the two of them later on. And then next, I have also Mr. Adil Rahman Khan with me. He's the secretary of ODCAR, Bangladesh, and is criminalized for documenting and reporting human rights violations in Bangladesh, such as extrajudicial killings, torture, and forced disappearance, violence against minority communities, and etc. Now, the pinnacle of this case is when on, if I'm not mistaken, on August 10th in 2013, he was picked by, from outside, by a man with no ID and arrest warrant and no certain uniform to arrest him. This is pretty questionable. And from this, he was arrested from the suspicion of violating Information and Communication Technology Act in 2006. Now, this is another interesting story to spill the tea together later on with Adilor. And now these three are the representatives of the HRDs who have been criminalized, and we'll talk further within the discussion. There are a lot more who have experienced this so far and have even ended up not only arrested, but also disappeared. And then needless to say, it is questionable for the transparency of why do these three HRDs have been criminalized for their acts of covering something that is supposed to be known by public. Now, I'm also honored to have Mr. Said from the Frontliner Defenders, FLD, and other colleagues here to have maybe give their thoughts for the strengths of issue, especially during the COVID-19. So maybe let us just start our discussion because we have already live stream. Hello, Mr. Haris Azhar, welcome. Let us start our discussion by maybe greeting. Hi. By maybe greeting these people first. I know that it's not the quite time to ask, but let us just greet the people. How are they doing first? Let me start with Adil. Hi, Adil. How are you from Bangladesh?
It's interesting time we are passing in Bangladesh. It's great. And it's always great because we are always in struggle like Haris and Fathia. So it's great to see Haris also today. He is present. After a long time, I can see Haris and my other friends like Saeed, Jobert, and you are there. So it's great.
Okay, I think it's a small reunion, in this small webinar. So thank you very much, Adil, for your greetings to the audience. And next we have Mr. Syed from the FLD. Hi, Mr. Syed, how are you doing today?
Well, very well. As I said, is that it's an opportunity to also like meet many old friends after quite some time. Haris, how are you? I know it's a tough time, but good to see you here.
Hi, Syed. I'm good. I'm not. I'm not really keen to say that always a tough time, but that is part of the risk and also part of the job to make a better life.
I know. Yeah, I know. And you are a fighter. We all will be fighting together. No.
Okay, that's cool. Maybe because Syed have also mentioned Haris Azhar. Please, Mr. Haris, hi, how are you today? I think you're driving at the moment.
No, I'm in the middle part of the in Papua. I'm good.
Okay.
Having just a short driving. Not I'm not really driving, but a colleague of mine is driving, so I will be enjoying the discussions. No worries.
Okay, sure. Okay, Fatih will be joining a bit, so maybe let's just discuss this first with the people here. Okay, so our first main point of discussion is that there is this, of course, recent finding of human rights violation from respective countries, from Bangladesh, from Indonesia, like Lokataru and Contras, and then, of course, Asia as a whole, from FLD. So I would like to know further what seems to be the main root cause and problems where these HRDs need to express and have the urgency to express their opinion and research also, but got criminalized instead. So maybe I want to hear from Adilur first. So Adilur, please just tell us and spill us what are the main trends of the gross human rights violations in Bangladesh, and what was documented the most by ODICAR that seems to be, criminalized and checked through by the state? Please do, Adilur. I think Adil.
Thank you very much, Nadine.
Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Line might communication might go up and down because of various reasons. So thank you very much for organizing this, and thanks to A3T and yourself. It's a great honor to be with friends today. Not only Bangladesh, we have in a very in variety of Asian countries. In many Asian countries, we have challenges. We will hear from Haris and Fatia in Indonesia. I will give, but we need to also discuss and many other human rights defenders who are in challenging situation. In many Asian countries, the challenges are authoritarianism, lack of democracy, lack of rule of law, and lack of functional justice delivery system. So these are the challenges. And when human rights defenders talk about highlighting repressions, highlighting inability of the state institutions, they become the targets. In Bangladesh, after the military-backed regime in 2007, which was installed, we have seen how the present government came to power. And we have seen that how in 2014 and 2018, the fraudulent elections happened, people could not vote, and how authoritarianism has become strong. Can you hear me?
Fatia,
Because I can hear other sounds also.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, go on, Adil, please do.
And thank you. The main challenges in Bangladesh are like dysfunctional judiciary. We have very high number of enforced disappearances, so the judiciary cannot protect the victims. We have very high number of extrajudicial executions, custodial torture, impunity enjoyed by the law enforcement agencies, and the government which is in power, the authoritarianism, which doesn't want to acknowledge people's power, people's right to vote. And that's why we are in this situation. And moreover, the challenges are like Bangladesh is a Western-backed authoritarianism, unlike Myanmar, Indonesia, or North Korea, which are China-backed, or Belarus, which is Russia-backed. Bangladesh, Egypt, these countries are Western-backed authoritarianism. And that's why you don't see that the countries which campaigns for democracy, rule of law, and justice, they remain silent in respect of Bangladesh, except one exceptional situation because of the change of US policy. We have seen how sanction has been imposed on Rapid Action Battalion because of the killing in the name of drugs containment, war on drugs, and enforced disappearances. Because of that, the human rights defenders have become target now. The state feels that human rights defenders reported about these violations, so this sanction has come. International level, some condemnation is coming. So they have become angry and they want to go for reprisals. That's why human rights defenders are under surveillance. Victim families are questioned, they are pressurized. Human rights organizations' activities have been in many ways become restricted, and bank accounts frozen, like Odhikar's bank account is frozen, Odhikar's registration has not been renewed. So it's a very challenging situation. And this challenging situation is having this kind of effect because we don't see much response from the international community. Like Bangladesh situation remains under the carpet. We have heard about Cambodia in UN. We have heard about Myanmar in UN, or North Korea about North Korea in UN. But we don't hear much about Bangladesh in UN or about Kashmir in UN. Because Bangladesh, India, as I have said, these countries are Western-backed. So we need to pinpoint that too, because there can't be double standardness in respect of addressing human rights violations. I think I should stop here and I will respond to any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't go into the issue of our case because I thought that you have already mentioned about it. Thank you.
Yeah. Of course, sure thing. Thank you so much, Adil.
Thank you.
Maybe adding up to my opening session earlier. And what I liked from your speech there was that you mentioned that impunity is actually enjoyed by the authorities, and where they don't also want to recognize the people power in Bangladesh. And by this is the root cause probably of why torture kept happening in Bangladesh. Extrajudicial killing, the enforced disappearance, and this impunity also gives an effect, a domino effect to where HRDs are also not recognized and is even criminalized for them to, keep enjoying their impunity from what you mentioned before. So thank you for your coverage from Bangladesh. Maybe let's hear first from Indonesia. We can start from Haris, Mr. Haris. Please do, because Fatih and Haris here have highlighted the Papua case, and Haris here is also from Papua. He's live from Papua. Can you maybe just tell us or state what is Papua's current condition? And it is common knowledge for us to we know that Papua has a deteriorating human rights condition, but maybe you want to highlight the case that you and Fatia are currently giving coverage at the moment and criminalized by it. Please do.
Yes, thank you. So I think in the general pattern or general sense, I think quite similar to I think, or maybe pretty much we can share the common threats or the common challenges of to see what is or what has been happening in Indonesia, in Bangladesh. I know Adil very much how he has uh, loyalties to the principle to see what is or what has been done by the regime in Bangladesh. That is also happened these days also to me and also to Fatia, which before I think me and Fatia pretty much advocating the cases, the similar cases. Now it's happening also to me and Fatia. But uh, I hope me and Fatia and the rest of the other friends across the world who support us or who support each other know how this how is the game being played, you know. So what is happening to me and Fatia, I think, is pretty much very obvious in terms of we've been doing a lot to advocate the human rights principles, especially in the very vulnerable areas like in Papua, which I think Sayed once a couple of years ago came here, right, to Papua, made a fact finding. So in Papua, the situation is depriving time after time. It's continuing the privations of the human rights issues here, and then pretty much after we see how many a lot of killings, disappearances, persecutions to the indigenous Papuans. It's also there is another big stories behind those violence, which is the natural resources or the economic issues. And then 2 years ago, I was appointed by the local governor here in Papua to let the humanitarian team to conduct an investigations uh, regarding the killing of one reverend in the one local remote area here. Then we had a findings, and one of the findings it's about the, the the operations of the gold mining company, and then that result led to 9 organizations, NGOs in Jakarta based and also Papuan based to do the research. And then the research came with very strong findings where the gold mining company operate and enjoying the how you call it the clearance done by the military, and but the impact is there is or there was how you call it the local indigenous uh, exclusion from the gold mining operations. And then that report also came up with naming some retired military or police who are enjoying the company operations. Uh, that report, I use that report to be discussed in my YouTube, which my account YouTube account is dedicated to discuss about the law and human rights issues in Indonesia. And then we end up with being reported by the one, I think he is the highest politically influenced in our current government or our current administrations who also name in that report. So, but that that video, that exercise of him to report me and Fatih to the police is like open the eyes of quite large uh, numbers of people in Indonesia that uh, that uh, that high prominent figure from the administration is very uh, quite dominant in many sectors in Indonesia. Every day he made a statement for everything. And these days he is campaigning to have the extension of the presidential periods. So it means that the current president, he campaigned that the current president or the current government should be extended to be in power for uh, uh, more 2 years. So it's like it's not the issue of me and Fatia per se, but it has become the benchmark how we just open uh, a small portion the door to challenge the government that this government has been done too much, which not connected to the wealth and the justice issue for the people. And this issue is very sensitive in Papua. While people in Papua, especially the ordinary people in Papua, they've been neglected, ignorance, then but the elite of the central government, they they are quite how you call it uh, have the good access to explore, to operate, to probably to enjoy more the result of the natural resources. So this is the issues that's why the human rights defenders, the pro-democracy activists, it's now came to the more to make a say, to make a voices in order to criticize. So, but this is also compete with the pressures that given to us from the elites of the government. The maneuvers, they also done a lot of maneuvers to give a pressures to us. Then yeah, so uh how you call it, the cyclus is always like that. Uh and uh and uh I think the groups, the activists, the human rights defenders, the lawyers, they have to be in that kind of situations because of the gap issues that pretty much the business issues that backbone or merge or utilize the close relations to the government or even the business group that owned by people who sit in the government. So this kind of things that uh, the pattern that happening quite a lot here, because in Indonesia also the campaign to welcoming the investment is also growing and welcoming to Indonesia and also to Papua. That's why it's really sadness for the local Papuans while they are living in the very low rate quality of life, but the numbers of investment and also business is also growing. So it's not fair. It's really discriminate the local indigenous people in Papua, and this is getting become so transparent for the national broad range informations on how to see this kind of practice keep happening. Yeah, I think it's very shameful if people know this, especially the defenders, the lawyers, if they know this and they not make a say. I think that's that is become a shameful. That's why people start to or keep they need to keep talking to make a voice.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Harris. And from what you have stated, I have highlight actually what you have maybe an iconic words of yours the past few days ago, which is my body may have been imprisoned, but not with the truth. So that is a very strong message from you to the audience, and then to also maybe to the designated Indonesian government agent. So before I would like to jump into Mr. Syed, because Haris has the same case and the same area of exposure of case, I would like to jump to Ms. Fatia. So please just tell us the current condition that, or maybe the progress of contrast. What is contrast doing for Papua at the moment? And then going straight to your case and etc. Please do.
Okay, thank you very much for the floor, Nadine, and good afternoon for Adil, Haris, and Said, and thank you very much for your participation as well in this webinar. And this is actually one of the moments that we are actually waiting for, because we know that the situation in Asia for the human rights defenders never been really great at that moment for the situation of civic drinking space, and how actually we are being repressed by the oligarch, and then also by how the government actually trying to preserve the violence itself. And maybe I will just continue about what Bin Haris already mentioned about the situation in Papua. Well, perhaps all the audience here that watching from YouTube, or people that will actually see this webinar will thinking about what is happening in Papua actually, because the first situation is that we never know like a very clear information about what happened in Papua, and the government never tried to actually raising or even giving some accountability and also transparency about the situation in Papua related to the military deployment, or about how actually the situation of the civilians in Papua is actually in a good condition or not. And we know that the militarism in Papua already been happening since 1969, when the first big mega corporate came to Papua, which is PT Freeport Indonesia. And indirectly, it creates some kind of problematic situation for the human rights situation in Papua. The military came to Papua to actually seizing, or even like to give like a security, in the name of security for the situation in Papua. But then we know until now, the militarism is actually become the root causes of the situation itself for the human rights mainstreaming in Papua. And the situation of human rights in Papua never gets any better since the militarism is still there. And the situation in Papua as well actually never become, having like a consent, or even like some kind of like a common problems for the Papuan itself. But it's always become like the central government problem and being decided in Jakarta, but not with the representatives from the Papuan itself. And we know that the militarism, or the military operation command regulation is actually in 1997. But until now, the militarism in Papua is still happening, or even getting more massive. And it's actually being, allegedly dealing, and then also having some kind of cooperation with the corporates that is actually having extractive industries in Papua. That's why Contrast and the other 8 organizations that collaborating to create some kind of like a report related to the situation of the military business, and then also the military deployment in Papua, and how it can actually impacted to the situation of human rights in Papua. We know that this research is actually opening about the military business that involving the state officials, and then also involving the military, still active military, and then also national police officers that become like a to actually open the beneficial ownership that being involved the public officials, that causing the conflict of interest, and how actually it could create some kind of like gratifications, and then also about the transparency about the positions that they are holding as a public officials. So we know that these corporates and deployment is actually causing a lot of troubles in several regions in Papua. For example, about the internally displaced persons, and these internally displaced person never actually being settled by the government with creating some kind of humanitarian aid, or even to take them back to their villages, because they are really afraid to come back or return to their villages or their homes, because they know that the occupation of the military that already been occupating in their villages from eight regency in Papua, especially in Tanjaya. We know that from eight regency, they are now already we've been losing four regency because of the military occupation that happening in those regency. So those people are now become internally displaced persons, and the numbers of the internally displaced person right now in Papua itself is already touching more than 30,000 people. So it's like they are deliberately trying to create Papua as an empty land so they can operate the extractive industry immediately, because they are now still exploring the lands, and they know that the gold mining and then other minerals actually under the residents. And to have that those kind of license for the mining operations, the land should be empty. That's why it's like a very structured operation for the military and the military business related, and it's allegedly having a very strong involvement of the public officials for the license, and then also for the environmental impact analysis. That's why the situation of conflict there is always escalating each days, and never been clearly being informed to the people generally. And that's why also the access for journalists, and then the access for even for the journalists, or even for the international delegates or international missions to come to Papua is very difficult, because the situation has never been stable. And the stigma about the separatist groups is also very strong, that causing a lot of civilians that become the victims of the conflict itself between the military and then also with the civil armed groups. And the accountability for the evaluation, or even for the supervision for the military operation in Papua also never been held by the government. But they always adding more people or more deployments for the military to come to Papua without any kind of evaluation why they should add more people to, or more personnel to Papua. So if this kind of situation keep continue, I'm afraid that this situation in Papua will get worse, and then also there is no some kind of mechanism that could actually settling the situation, unless the government would like to try opening the dialogue and pull back all the military from Papua, and conduct the moratorium for the business or the mining operations in Papua, and returning those people that already become the internally displaced person, and the guarantee for safetyness to those people internally displaced persons as well, because we know that the relation between the military business and then also for the extractive in Papua is very or quite strong. And related to the criminalization itself that happening these days, we know that it's not only happening to me and Harris in person, but we know that the numbers of the criminalization, terror, intimidation, or even killings for the people that actually working for environment, anti-corruption, or even human rights in general are a lot and getting increased for the last 5 years. Last year, we contrast actually documented 269 cases of attacks to the human rights defenders in Indonesia itself. And we know that this situation is not only happening in Indonesia, but we know that this kind of uh, uh, incident is actually happening in other countries in Asia with the very similar pattern because of one history that never been solved, which is the gross human rights violations that never settled by the government, that causing the repeated pattern of violence that created by the government in Asia. And thus the protection for the human rights defenders in Asia never been become like a priority. They still being stigmatized as the enemy of the state, and never have any protection or even like a recognition from the government to see actually human rights defenders is a very important position or a very important persons that mainstreaming the human rights in Indonesia, and they are not like an enemy of the state, because what they are working, what they are doing is actually for the better government situation and better states as well, to defend the human rights that become like the most fundamental values that should be owned by the people. So I believe that those kind of patterns, or even some countries, or yeah, I mean some countries in Asia have like worse situation, or from the degree of the incidents that happening to the human rights defenders will be vary. But the thing is that the government in Asia, not only in Indonesia, they are tend to actually preserve the authoritarianism culture that actually pushing back all the human rights defenders work. That's why we have to create some kind of like a collective movement from this human rights defender in Asia to actually questioning the government obligation to actually protect the human rights defenders works as well, and how actually these countries that still repressing all kind of critics, all kinds of human rights mainstreaming should be evaluated fully, and maybe have like a stronger mechanism in the UN for the states that actually having a very bad track records for the human rights mainstreaming shouldn't be like the Human Rights Council member, for instance. But this is could be very difficult actually to approach. But the thing is that if they still have those privilege, they still have those spaces to claiming the figures of a very good countries, a very healthy countries, without touching the human rights aspects as their priority, then the situation in the national level will get worse even more. For instance, Indonesia, and maybe they will continue to create like a very odd statement, like postponing the elections, for instance. So I think there should be like a very stronger mechanism for the protection, and then also like a stronger sanction to those countries that really, committing a lot of human rights violations, especially for the human rights mainstreaming in Asian countries that having a similar culture. Maybe that's all from me. Nadine, thank you very much.
Yes, also thank you very much for your elaboration, not only for the current condition in Papua, but also from your recent findings from Contrast on how much, just how many cases of gross human rights violations happen in Indonesia. And Fatia here also have mentioned that there is a repetitive action from the higher ups which caused again impunity, the same pattern as it is happening in Bangladesh. So I think it's quite questionable on how Indonesia and also Bangladesh upholds the word democracy and then the freedom of expression, opinion. So maybe I want to just give the microphone to Mr. Syed, the representative of FLD, on how do you perceive this and what should be the concrete mechanism for us to just start, maybe from Fatia have said before, we should start by maybe changing the mindset or just voicing out tons of cases so that people would recognize and the state will also recognize those cases. So please do, Mr. Syed.
Thanks a million, Nadine, and very happy to see you, Haris, Adil, Fatia, and hear you also here. I like completely agree what have been said here. I work with Frontline Defenders. It's an Irish international organization. We focus on the protection and protection of human rights defenders, particularly when they are in difficult situation. And I cover Southeast Asia. So like working with defenders in several Southeast Asian countries, as been said, we for now for a few years we have been seeing that criminalization is the topmost like harassment tools for the states to like harass human rights defenders, and followed by arbitrary arrest and detention, which of course has again like quite linked with criminalization. Now, Nadine, you are like you are saying like to highlight on the causes, root causes.
Yes, that is true. Hello, Mr. Syed. Hello.
World, but
Mr. Syed, I'm so sorry. I think you were breaking up your signal.
now it's okay.
Yeah, it's good now.
You can hear. All right, yeah. So I was saying like the pattern in Asian countries particularly is that the authoritarian governments are like getting more and more like gain on by themselves in terms of like many countries having authoritarian regimes, some countries moving to more authoritarian approach. And when the authoritarian governments are there, the first the root cause I would say like the first thing is any authoritarian regime, they don't like courageous voices. So that's why they don't like human rights defenders. And particularly when any defender comes with very courage and like stand for others, they want to like break their moral. And they want to create some kind of fear, because the any authoritarian regime, they run on fear factor is very important for them. So I think the main purpose for them, what they want to do, of course, like at the end, whether they succeed or not, that's a debatable thing. But they think that through criminalization they can create this fear among many other human rights defenders, and they can stop the voice of the courageous people like human rights defenders. So that is one reason. And the second reason is, of course, we know like when any sort of like any human rights defenders going through any criminal procedure, like it takes up a lot of time, money, effort, stress, and so on. So then like of course you have to fight back, and that makes you like more busy on that front, and less on your regular work of human rights. And that's what the regime they want to like stop us to do our work. And so another way for them is that they make ourselves busy to fight the case, to run to the court. And we all know that how lengthy the process is, like how cumbersome sometimes, like you have to travel like many miles to just hear to just attend the hearing and so on. So it takes up a lot of time. So they want, through criminalization, they want to make ourselves busier so that we don't do what they don't want to see us doing. And And also the another reason is like they think that the regime and who does this criminalization against human rights defenders, not always the governments. In many cases, like if we look at the statistics, companies, private institutions are also now, coming up and criminalizing human rights defenders. They think that they can isolate human rights defenders through these, trumped up cases. And so another aim is they want to isolate us. But I think like maybe like it was a big issue few years back, but more and more they are failing. Like whatever strategy or whatever like the objective they want to fulfill through this, like isolating us or like making us out of our regular work or creating fear. I think more and more it's been failed. And even people like Haris, Fatia, Adil, who face this kind of criminalization, becoming more popular, becoming more like, close to people and becoming iconic figures, iconic human rights defenders to people. And once we can do more this, I think like the regime would completely fail. And that's how I think we can fight criminalization. Of course, the other fight is there through fighting through the court, through the legal procedure. But as Adil also explained, in many countries we know that the regimes are coming with more repressive laws. The judiciary has been compromised, and the judiciary is not anymore like years back. Probably like we always had hope on our judiciaries, and we used to use our judiciary for better cause. But more and more, we are seeing the judiciary is more compromising with the regime. So probably like the legal fight in many cases may not bring us a positive result. But I think like the more and more the regimes will go for criminalized human rights defenders, they will lose their popularity. Rather, human rights defenders would become more popular. And just to say about what strategies can be taken, I think like this is the main thing we have to. And Fatia also mentioned that we have to like be more and more solidarity, united, whatever possible ways, how difficult it is, no matter. And there comes like local human rights defenders, international groups like us, or like embassies who are committed to do, for example, like prison visit, trial monitoring, helping human rights defenders, visiting them in prison, like all this kind of stuff. They need to do more and more. And on top of that, everything is that we have to express solidarity in different ways to defenders who have been under trumped up charges. Because this is not just with Adil, Fatiha, or Haris. It is happening in each and every Asian countries. Let's say it's happening in Thailand with the lese majesty cases, peaceful protest cases, computer crime cases. It is happening in Cambodia. We know that the Naga were they just got released just because of like peaceful protest. It is happening in Vietnam, like people have been charged for like anti-state activities. In Philippines, it is anti-terror act. So everywhere, like this became a like very uh, sort of like a very handy tool for the regime to criminalize human rights defenders. So we need to fight back. And finally, what I would say, like that yes, I mean like we have sort of like international mechanisms including UN and so on. I think one thing we don't look into, or we don't ask the international actors to look into, is that, well, in one hand, yes, I mean UN is not a body that can breach the sovereignty of each state, that we understand. But at the same time, since human rights is an universal thing. So whenever a state is bringing some law which is repressive law and which is anti-human rights law, there should be some mechanism by the UN or global bodies that like this shouldn't happen, like in this. Because with the power of sovereignty, each and every state is just bringing whatever law they want to make. And sometimes many of these law even don't have a like basic respect for human rights. This can't happen. Like somehow the global community should look into like how they can stop governments and regimes to enact such kind of laws. Because once these laws are there, it's then very easy to criminalize not just human rights defenders but anyone. So I think like this is an area we all should think and talk together. Let's see what mechanism comes up. Although coming up with mechanism is not so easy thing, but we should keep trying. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Said. So what I highlight here is that the rule of law needs to be more enforced in order for us to tackle many human rights violations across Asia. Because there are already international mechanisms, but the thing is there are no concrete and again accountability for check and balances for the domestic laws implemented in each state. Now, regarding law, I think I would like to also question back again to Adil and Fatih and also Haris, but I would like to start first from Adil. So I noticed here that there is the act in Bangladesh, the act of number 11, if I'm not mistaken, of 1972, where it is stated regarding the democracy and human rights in Bangladesh. And it is stated also that human rights, fundamental human rights needs to be respected and needs to be upheld for their dignity. But instead, the implementation there is almost zero. If I can see from the cases you have documented from ODCAR and other CSOs in Bangladesh. So how do you perceive, again, because you mentioned rule of law in Bangladesh, how do you perceive them? Is it just a form of formality? Or is it maybe there is a certain plan that there will be a change of rule of law regarding this? How do you perceive this, Adil?
You are asking about the constitution.
Yes. Yes.
The constitution was drafted in 1972 at the desire of the ruling elites in those days. And Constituent Assembly was not there elected by the people. So people's voice not properly represented while drafting the constitution. Anyway, whatever we had since 1972 has been changed drastically through the 15th Amendment. And now you have a totally authoritarian system. So it has become a kind of book which you can call it a book of history, where all the amendments are there and you can read these amendments. You can travel through these amendments to understand from where we started in 1972 and where we are now today in respect of the constitutionality of the state. Bangladesh is not definitely a democratic state. Bangladesh does not have independent institutions. And our judiciary, as Said has already mentioned, it's totally compromised. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Adil. Maybe I can just jump into Fatia regarding the law of regarding law in the area or the scope in human rights, maybe such as the law number 26 of 2000, and we have a lot of mention regarding human rights in the constitution of number 28 and etc. So how do you perceive on how the state as a whole implement these laws? Was it just a form of formality? Same questions as Adilur. How do you perceive this?
Well, actually, it's like the government actually learning from how they have the bad track records on the past, but they are learning not to be like a better government, but how to repress people better. You know, for example, like there is like the ITE law or the electric information and electronic information and transaction law, or we call that UU-ITE, or even like in the law number 39, 1999 about human rights that already been discussed in the national legislation program to add like an article for the human rights defender protection. But it's been 15 years since the first discussion to actually add that on the law. But apparently, until now, they have been very reluctant to actually put that articles for the protection on human rights defenders. So maybe it's, my answer will be like the same with Adil, that all of the platforms all of the structures, all of the legislation and the rule of law already fulfilled by the Indonesian government because of the track records on the past. And it's not necessarily become, their priority or even their willingness to actually having like a political will to settle the gross human rights violation, to end the impunity, or to end the chain of uh, violence, culture of violence in this country. So that's why those law is only become like an accessory for the government these days, at least for the current regime, because they are not really following what the law is stating, you know. So for example, like this current regime that led by President Joko Widodo is already recruiting or even appointing some people that legitimately having those their names in some findings, some legitimate findings from the UN or even from the National Commission on Human Rights, for their involvement on the gross human rights violations. They are not really, on behind the desk, or even just to become some kind of like advisor for the president, but they are officially being appointed to become the part of the government that having a very strategic position, that causing a lot of the cases on the gross human rights violation very stagnant or even getting backwards, and it creating some kind of stagnancy for the democracy itself in Papua, because they are actually, become friends and very closely having a relation, because they are in a very strategic position in Indonesia right now. So I don't know whether Joko is really into the victims communities, and really keeping his promises when he was inviting the victims communities to come to the state palace, um, or even there he was just trying to gain some kind of electability from those communities. So I believe that is actually for gaining the popularity only, because when he has become the president in 2014 and then 2019, those situations being stagnant or even getting regressed, because the articles or even the laws and some kind of regulations that really repressing or even shrinking the civic space is getting a lot without any supervision, like the very wide authority that given to the police, like we have in the new order, when we have the dual function of the TNI or ABRI at the time for the military, and now the TNI the police already have like a multifunction to become public officials or others involvement in pandemic situation, for instance, and they could actually issuing some telegram letter for a watching or even do surveillance to the people that criticizing the government and causing a lot of criminalization happen. And they are also raising from the grave of one of the law that already revoked by the Constitutional Court in 2007, which is the defamation to the president. And now they are actually raising about that article again in this very modern reformasi era.
Okay, thank you very much, Fatia, for your elaboration. Maybe Haris, you want to add up to Fatia's statement?
Yeah, I think what has been said by Fatia and also Adil is pretty much describe all the details briefly regarding the situations or the common situations that happen in some undemocratic countries. But as I just would like to add that it has been the trend, the global democratic trend that the value of the democracy and also rule of law and also human rights is only accommodated into the standard setting or the on paper setting, and also develop the institutions. But uh, there is a big questions, become a big questions by the broad range of academicians, scientists, or also advocates, that how those papers, norms, and institutions can be useful into the real situation. Because in the real situations, uh, the challenge is very political, technical, and tricky. Then we need to be in that kind of know how to deal with those details, technicals, and trickies. So that is the challenge, I think, these days in many, because if we say rule of law, elections, judiciary systems, it has been worldwide being discussed from the international, regional, with events, because it's just repeating the old songs into the current disco mix music, into the current karaoke settings, where the system has been it's been settled and allowing people to talk. But that's only the talk and talk. Then the question is how that can be used to answer the real burning situation, like Fatia mentioned in Papua. The way that Jakarta, the central government, discussed the situations in Papua, it's pretty much not complete, uh, cannot catching up the steps, the runs, and the anxiousness of those people who have to displace. They are they are not trying, but they are make a voice from the step that they make from one soil to the other to run away from the open fires. So this kind of situation that needs to be discussed further cleverly by those people who are sitting in the judicial system, in the institutions, in the oversight body. I think we are there, and in many traditional way of overview, I think it always come back to the morality, the responsibility of the individuals who are sitting in the administration.
Okay, so thank you very much, Haris, for your statement. Maybe last I will give the last maybe microphone or the last chance to Mr. Syed, maybe to give us a bit of explanation or a brief maybe plan on what should be the first step for us to tackle human rights violation in Asia, or maybe in the mentioned countries in Bangladesh and in Indonesia, because you have mentioned before the current state of the loop happening against human rights defenders and their criminalization acts. But what should be the first step for us as CSOs or maybe other individuals to abolish such acts?
Well, yeah, I will be very, very brief. First of all, I express my deep respect and solidarity to Haris, Fatia, Adil, like human rights defenders who are facing criminalization, going through criminalization. I think we should do this think first, like, more and more solidarity and respect, pay tribute actually to those people who are taking this trouble. And that's one way, of course, like to show that, you are not alone and we all are there. I remember like during the revolutionary period in many countries, like the revolutionaries used to, like, take a strategy, like, okay, if you want to take our leader to prison, like we all will go to the prison, like this. I think, like, it can be a symbolic thing, like this way, that if, okay, if they want to criminalize, how many defenders they can criminalize. And that's how we can even maybe outnumber the prison, people in the prison, and then even change. I know many incidents that were when defenders were in prison, they also even motivated people inside the prison. So I'm quite sure, like, this is a strategy been taken by many governments, but they would definitely fail in this strategy. And in terms of like what can be done, I think the most important is for the work, the defenders being criminalized or harassed, we should do that work more and more. More and more people doing the same work, showing that this is a legitimate work, this is a good work, and we all are ready to carry forward the work, whatever the regime is treating us. I think that's uh, there might be different strategies of doing this, and there might be needed many discussion and ways to do this. But this is what we need to do, the best possible ways. And in terms of like having more better laws, repealing restrictive laws, and the global action on that, I myself not quite sure. I raised this because this is something important, that we have to stop countries and regimes, authoritarian regimes, to have any law. They can't just do and bring laws at their wish. Somehow they should be stopped. They should be in line with human rights principles, and global community has more to do in this regard. I don't have it like clear answer how this can be done, but we should keep this discussion ongoing. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Said. So, Mr. Said's last statement is our closing for our today's discussion. So, I would like to have a closing statement for this event today. Is that human rights violation, as stated from Adil and then Mr. Said, Haris, and Fatia, is considered as a loop and a repetitive action in Asia, not only for a certain country but as a whole. So, the rule of law is questionable for us and is almost seen as none or zero, since the amendments does not really rely on the topic of human rights, and instead it focuses on the interests of the higher ups that have been on the top list of priority for themselves. So again, human rights has not been seen as a priority for states to uphold and also enforce. That is why we see that here impunity kept happening in the form of violence, coerce, and etc. And even these speakers mentioned that the pinnacle for this can be seen by how the state criminalizes or label the human rights defenders through individuals or CSOs as criminals, and even label them as defamation against the state or the designated government agent. We really hope the best for Fatia, Haris, and Adilur, and really hope for more support from the audiences who are participating in this webinar. And we'll also look applause for this webinar in the recording from this YouTube. And we really hope that the support and campaigns can be what Mr. Said explained, a legitimate work and the good thing to do for us all, especially for the human rights defenders who are trying to defend the fundamental value of human rights in Asia. So I think that is all for today. Thank you for participating, Adilur, and then Mr. Said, Haris, and Fatia. Thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye, Adil. Said.